In my last Dragon's Dogma video, I beat the game in hard mode by making it as easy as humanly possible. Today I set out to finish the game in a more challenging way, by literally setting myself on fire. But not my actual self, since it would be quite difficult for you to clearly understand my words while I'm simultaneously screaming at the top of my lungs. So I did the next best thing and set the player character on fire. Because you see, in Dragon's Dogma there's this fun little skill called Emulation the player can learn, which engulfs you in flames and damages all nearby enemies around you. The downside though is that you can literally burn to death while doing so. Now in a normal playthrough that wouldn't be that big of a deal, because if you're low on health or don't have any heals left, you just wouldn't use the skill. It is in no way intended to be your primary source of damage, and I took that personally. So here are the rules for the run. Obviously, I'm not allowed to do any damage except by setting myself on fire. This, however, does not include things like luring enemies into a camp with NPCs or into an open fire. Also, I'm thinking of limiting the usage of pawns, but since they are such an integral part of Dragon's Dogma, and I at least need them to get immolation in the first place, I will compromise by using only offline pawns, if I even use more than my primary pawn, which I don't plan on doing anyway after I got the skill. And since that's pretty much all of the rules, let's find out if it's possible to beat Dragon's Dogma while burning to a crisp. The game begins like any other playthrough would, with the tutorial playing as John Dragon's Dogma. And yes, I'm attacking and dealing damage with a sword, but since this is a completely different character than the one I'm going to play for the rest of the game, I'm allowed to do that. After the tutorial, the game tries to be edgy by translating a deep quote from some fictional language or so, and then plays this epic cutscene of the dragon just falling out of the sky. Man, I could watch that all day. Next, it's time to finally create our character, and I know a playthrough where I ignite myself, causing me to be covered in flames would be the perfect opportunity to roleplay as a certain superhero, but I'm just not a fan of the human glow stick. So I'm just gonna create some funny looking dude because I can. Meet Marble Global. I opted for a lighter character for the faster stamina regeneration, who still wouldn't be too small, so I could still reach and hold onto enemies if they're a bit above the ground like the Griffin or Cockatrice later on. Because that's literally my main game plan going into this run. Cling onto enemies while we both slowly burn to death. Man, this video is kinda dark. But whatever. From now on, I'm not allowed to do any damage except with the Emulation skill and its weaker version Backfire. So I just walk up to the dragon and wait for him to slap me and tear my heart out. Oh, and that right there of course doesn't count because, you know, cutscene. After waking up, I'm prompted to choose my starting vocation, which has no effects on this playthrough. So I just picked Strider and went on to the town gate. My main goal right now is to just somehow get to Grand Soren, where I'm then able to change my vocation into Magic Archer, since that's the class which learns Backfire and Emulation. At the gates we meet Rook, and unlike my last playthrough where I completely ignored him, I'm actually glad to have him this time, because right now he's my only source of damage. And as chance will have it, just a few steps down the road a traveler is attacked by goblins. So let's see what Rook has in store in terms of damage. Well, it could be worse, I guess. So with my first level up under my belt, I head on to the encampment, where after a short talk with a glowing rock, I swear I'm not crazy, the settlement gets attacked by a cyclops. And being the brave hero Marble Global is, he of course without any hesitation runs out to help fight the beast, by standing around and watching everyone around him getting obliterated. But even with all of the soldiers dead, the fight is not lost, because I can just revive Rook over and over again, denying him the sweet salvation of death and force him to continue the battle. I also found out that I can lure the Cyclops into those burning piles to set him on fire. So I'm helping, I guess? A few minutes later, the Cyclops finally bites the dust and we see Palpatine slowly walking away. Then it's time to once more talk to the glowing stone and create my main pawn, which I made look like my player character had a kid with a frog and named her Global Marble. I know, peak creativity right there. I also figured that since it will be a while till I can actually be helpful in fights, that hiring another pawn would be a good idea for now. Next, Sir Byrne wants to teach us some of the basics of the game, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit skeptical if my pawns could handle that without me, especially since there's a time limit for destroying the training dummies. I mean, I already had playthroughs where I failed that quest even with me attacking. But as it turns out, there was nothing to worry about. Now all that's left to do is talk to Mercedes and take my well-earned rest. Nope, forget it, the Hydra is attacking. So, yeah, let's fight then, I guess. And by that I of course mean watch my pawns do all the work and revive them if downed. Now I wouldn't say they're doing exceptionally well, but they're making progress. Not much, but some. But it seems that after the Hydra munched on some of her soldiers, Mercedes had enough of me just standing around doing nothing and made my character throw an explosive barrel down the Hydra's throat. I expected the head to instantly blow off or something, but all that happened was that one of the heads looked like it had just swallowed a cow. And 20 seconds later, a completely different head decided to just pop off. So yeah, so much for the Hydra battle. I have to say, I imagined it to be way more annoying. Speaking of annoying, next up is of course the Ox Escort mission. The goal of that quest is to bring the severed Hydra head back to the capital as a gift for the king. But that is done via an ox cart, which is incredibly slow and just stops at any sign of danger. And there are of course lots of dangerous signs on the way to Grand Soren. Now, under my last video, many of you have commented that I could kick the ox if I wanted it to go faster, and yeah, that's some great advice. But unfortunately one that I can't take in this playthrough, since that would damage the ox and dealing damage from non-self-igniting sources are against the rules. So I did what every sane person would do, crawled under my table and cried. I meant escorted the ox cart and helped my pawns out if they were downed. And it all went just as you would imagine. I watched some NPCs fight each other and then slowly marched on. There were no real problems along the way, mainly because we would outnumber pretty much every enemy encounter. But now that I watched that footage again, man, these soldiers could have at least done something. Once I have arrived in Grand Soren, I head straight to the inn to finally change my vocation to Magic Archer. Because, as I mentioned before, that's the class that learns Backfire and Emulation. Great! Now all that's left to do is to level up the vocation until I'm able to learn the spells. So let's see, at which level do I learn Backfire? Oh god, level 7? And Emulation? 9? It seems like I have a lot of grinding ahead of me before I can actually start playing the game. But first I need to do one more main quest, namely the one in the Pawn Guild where I explore the Everfall, because at the bottom there is a pot crystal I want to pick up. So while I go get that, let me explain the leveling in Dragon's Dogma real quick for all of you who might not be too familiar with the game. There are two kinds of levels in Dragon's Dogma. First, the character level, which is basically like the level you would know from any other game. Increasing it will also increase all of your character stats like health, strength, stamina and so on. And then there's the vocation rank, which is a separate level for each of the classes that goes up to a maximum of 9. Yes, you heard right, in order to unlock Emulation, I need to rank up the Magic Archer as high as possible, without doing any damage myself of course. Now, leveling up the character level is pretty straightforward. Kill enemies, get XP, level up. The stronger the enemy, the more XP you get. Leveling the vocation however is a bit different though. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but the gist is that it's better to kill many weaker enemies than just a few strong ones. And now that I have a pot crystal, let's head to a grinding spot where I can do just exactly that. But first let's go buy some new equipment for my primary pawn, since, you know, he will carry my ass in the early game. So off we go. I plan to farm the goblins in the Werder woodlands, which means I have to walk a bit. On my way there I encounter some wolves, which surprisingly aren't that big of a deal for the pawns. I mean, sure, it takes some time to kill them, but overall they delivered. And I even thought to myself that maybe leveling up this way wouldn't be too much of a challenge. But oh boy, once I reached the top of this hill, the bandits slapped me right back to reality. The pawns just did not know how to fight them. They were all over the place, each attacking a different bandit and often only hitting them once before aimlessly running around for a few seconds. It was pure chaos. So after watching them struggle for like 5 minutes, I decided that I have seen enough of this tragedy and just ran away. And after getting lost a bit, I finally reached the Delphire Grove rest camp where I set up my pot crystal to make this kind of my home base. All that's left to do now is grind some goblins, I guess. And this is about as exciting as you'd imagine, because as opposed to the bandits earlier, it turns out that goblins are really weak and easy to kill, even for pawns. So to speed things up a bit and not bore you to death, I'm just gonna skip that part of the playthrough. Basically all I did was just run from one group of goblins to the next one, watching everyone else do all the work. And for everyone interested, I'm going to put up my route on the screen right now. You know, just in case someone's mad enough to actually recreate this. And in case anyone's wondering how long this ordeal took me, 5 hours. Yes, I watched my pawn struggle with basic coordination for 5 full hours. But hey, once I reached level 7, I was even allowed to help, since that's when the Magic Archer learns Backfire, which is, like I said earlier, the weaker version of Emulation. But since I wanted the real deal, I continued farming. Now that I can finally set myself on fire, let's move on. But first let me give you a quick rundown of the skill itself. Emulation sets the player on fire for 90 seconds while also causing 20 damage every 3 seconds. This may not sound like much, but it still can get dangerous if you forget to keep an eye on your health bar. While active, Emulation also deals blunt damage to every enemy around the player as well as setting them on fire. This damage scales with the strength stat. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I also picked up the double jump and dodge abilities while I was at it, because they are always nice to have. As I mentioned in the beginning, I would not take any pawns except my main pawn with me, so let's go and release them real quick. And while I'm at it, I also changed my main pawn's vocation to mage and let him only have a healing spell. This way the only damage he can do is through normal weapon attacks, and believe me, that damage is neglectable. Speaking of which, I also bought some daggers and a staff from the merchant at the town square, since Emulation scales off of strength and better daggers equals more strength. I won't be using them for too long though, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Now all that's left to do is to buy a ton of healing herbs and stamina mushrooms. I then head to Sir Maximilian to accept my first worm hunt quest and then leave the city to meet with the two creepy dudes living inside a cave. On my way there I encounter a cyclops, and me being me, I of course wanted to test my newly learned skill. So I set myself on fire and latched onto the cyclops butt, just, yeah, chilling there like some sort of burning parasite. The cyclops tried his best to get rid of me, but since I know how to use the jump button, there wasn't really much he could do about me. After 90 seconds the flames went out and the cyclops lost about 1 health bar. So I repeated the previous step 3 more times and the beast was done. Also, it got dark while fighting, so I definitely need to work on my damage output. After I talked to the two dudes and finished the quest, I went and dug out some new daggers that were nearby, while also burning some wolves and harpies along the way. Back in Gransoren, I went to my old pal Fornival to buy some Conqueror's Periapts to boost my strength in future fights even further, and accepted the next quest. And I'm really glad I bought those Periapts, because now it's time to recapture a castle that has been overrun by goblins. After a short briefing, I make my way into the castle via an underground tunnel, ignoring most of the goblins there, unless the ones I decided to not ignore, and go get the lever to open the main gate and let all the soldiers in, starting an epic fight. And while it showed that burning some measly goblins would be a cakewalk, they unfortunately also have 2 cyclopses that need to be defeated. So having played hundreds of hours of MMOs, I of course instantly knew what to do. Kill the ads first so I can then attack the cyclopses in peace. I ignited myself once more, and like I did with the cyclops on the road, I grabbed onto its juicy buttocks while roiding myself up on Conqueror's Periapts. At first I was afraid his friend would not approve me dangling over the cyclops' butt crack, but he was busy doing who knows what, because I was able to stay on for the entire 90-second cycle of the spell, leaving the cyclops with only 1 health bar left. As soon as I jumped down though, I instantly got double comboed. From there on it was rinse and repeat. The first cyclops fell pretty easily, the second one was a tad harder. For some reason I just couldn't get a good grip on him, and the goblins didn't even hesitate to shoot their own ally with a freaking bomb arrow. But I persisted, and with the help of a ton of shrooms I made it work. Oh, and Global Marble also did something. Next, it's time to chase the boss goblin down, who being just a standard goblin was no problem at all. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, the quest is done. Now with 2 worm hunt quests successfully under my belt, it's time to go and meet the Duke. I got laughed at, yada yada yada. I swear to god, one day I'm going to dedicate a video just to show ways to kill you, you little shit. And then proceed with trials and tribulations. Unlike last time, however, we don't want Fornival to get imprisoned. That's obviously more legwork for me to do, but I just can't do without his unlimited supply of Conqueror's Periapts in this run. So I talked to some people, collected proof of his innocence, and escorted a witness from buttfuck nowhere to Gransoren.
Not guilty.
Next up, Elders tells me about this Griffin terrorizing the lands, and being the hero I am, I of course offer to help get rid of it. I meet with the quote-unquote elite soldiers outside of the city, who make me think that if they are the best of the best, then the city is in big trouble. And from there we make our way to the spawn point of the Griffin, where after setting myself on fire I try to do a heroic jump from this rock onto the monster, but failed miserably. So I had to walk up to him and climb him from there like a peasant. Once I made sure I had a firm grip on his butt, hey, don't judge me, okay? It's not that I enjoy grabbing onto the behinds of every monster I come across. It just happens to be that you don't fall off that easily there. Where was I? Ah yes, once I had a firm grip on the body, I popped some Conqueror's Periapts. After some struggling, the Griffin attempted to shake me off by flying away, but then got staggered mid-flight, which caused it to crash down. I used this opportunity to readjust my position, but as the Griffin took off again, it managed to throw me off and fly into the distance. Now, in my last video I one-shotted it right here and there, but how you normally do the quest, and how I'm going to do it now, is that you follow the Griffin to the top of the Blue Moon Tower and finish it off there. So So I head back to Gran Soren to restock my supplies of healing items and periapts and make my way to the very nearby and definitely not half of the map away Blue Moon Tower. There I met up with the soldiers and helped them out by making some tasty harpy chicken wings. I have to say, harpies are one of my favorite enemies to fight in this run, since as soon as they even touch me in the slightest, they instantly crash down, making it a walk in the park to kill them. But I'm not here to fight oversized chickens with boobs, I'm here to take on the Griffin. So I make my way to the top and then try to burn down a barricaded gate, which took annoyingly long. But I didn't want to just stop in the middle of it, so I let the Griffin go at the soldiers while I just stood there. Luckily he got bored pretty soon and vanished into the building. He then came back though, helping us by destroying a locked gate, and after some more running away, it was time to finally face him at the tower's summit. And since it was such a cakewalk the first try, surely this time won't be any different. Right? Well, as it turns out, the Griffin was pissed this time around, and as a result of that decided to actually use his wings and fly around, making it significantly harder for me to reach him. At first I thought I would just wait it out till he lands again, but it seems like he has no intention in doing so. And after some time running around breaking my head how the hell I should do damage to him if he's up there and I'm down here, I noticed that his tail was dangling around pretty provocative this entire time. So I ignited myself, and lo and behold, turns out that was the solution to my problem. I originally planned to grab onto his tail, but as it turned out, simply jumping around while near it was enough to set the bird on fire, which caused the Griffin to finally crash down again. This gave me enough time to grab onto him, and thus starting the inescapable cycle of him trying to fly away while burning and instantly crashing, making this fight pretty easy to be honest. All I had to do was to make sure I was holding onto him while he was getting up and keep an eye on my health and stamina. With the Griffin defeated, I make sure to pick up the pod crystal lying around here and put it up at the entrance of the tower, since I need to come back later and definitely don't want to walk all the way here again. Back in Gran Soren, I reported back to Elders and accepted the next quest, and it was at this point I noticed that my pawn wasn't anywhere near me, so I summoned him real quick. The quest I just accepted needs me to find the thief, and since I already know where to find him, I just head straight to the old quarry where he and some bandits were hanging out. After the fight, which was not hard at all despite being tossed around a bit, the thief smoke bombed away like a bad supervillain to, you guessed it, the Blue Moon Tower. Remember the pod crystal I just set up there? Yeah, that's why. So back at the tower, I once more make my way up there, this time ignoring all of the enemies, and then face the wizard. And this fight took me a while to figure out. As you know by now, my fighting style requires me to get pretty up close to the enemy. One might even say I need to be right next to them, or on top of them. And until now this wasn't much of an issue, but it turns out that Salamet over here is a pretty big coward. Because every time I even get remotely close to him, he just blinks away. And he does this over and over no matter how often you try it. Now with ranged weapons or pawns that would do actual damage, this would be no problem, but I have neither of those, making this fight way harder than it needs to be. And in addition to him spamming icicles and firewalls, Salamet also summons skeleton warriors to fight for him. At first I ignored them and just ran after Salamet over and over again in the hopes he has some sort of hidden mana pool that would deplete with every teleportation he does. But after about 10 minutes of chasing, it was clear he has no mana pool. I then changed up my strategy and tried to kill the skeleton knight. I said tried because, well, he killed me. Turns out this skeleton is one beefy boy. The next attempt I just ignored the wizard entirely and solely focused on the skeletons. And while the small ones were no problem, the big knight took some effort. Meaning I couldn't just stand there idling next to him like with most of the other smaller enemies because of all the spells thrown at me, and, well, a single heavy attack from him would nearly kill me. So I resorted back to the age-old strategy of every Dark Souls player, the roly-poly. Rolling around I was able to dodge most of the incoming attacks, but it also meant that I was only doing very little damage at a time. But with enough patience I was able to defeat the skeleton knight, and this was the trigger to finally stop the wizard from blinking away as soon as I got too close. And even though he summoned a second skeleton knight, I was able to ignore this one and focus entirely on Salamet. Instead of blinking away, he would now only run away, which is still annoying but at least doable. So after some chasing and dodging, he finally fell. Literally. I picked up the ring he dropped and the pod crystal at the entrance of the tower because I don't plan on coming back here, and meet Mercedes for the fight against Julian. But I'm just gonna skip over this one because the most exciting part of the quest was this very suspicious looking pawn I met on the street. After that I once more head back to Elders for the Cockatrice fight. Oh no, sorry, my bad. Of course I need to run across half of the map first and then go back to Gran Soren and fight the Cockatrice. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense otherwise, right? Anyway, I returned to the city to confront the giant black chicken, and to my surprise, it turned out to be one of the easiest fights throughout the entire challenge. Because as soon as I approached it, it burst into flames, and once I got a grip on its tail, the battle was practically won. It seems that in Dragon's Dogma, birds are extremely vulnerable to fire. It took only 2 rounds of Emulation before the Cockatrice realized it was a terrible idea to attack Ransoren and fled. And with that out of the way, it's time for the final stretch before the fight against Grigori. I head back to the Duke, who gifts me some gold and a fancy new cloak, and then it's time to make my way to the Great Wall of Dragon's Dogma. So I stock up on supplies, open up the most pointless gate in history, and arrive at the Great Wall encampment. Upon entering, the game plays a cutscene showing off some threatening cyclopses, but I'm just gonna ignore them for now and head straight to the room with the Chimera. And oh boy, this fight really gave me a headache. As you might know, a Chimera consists of 3 parts: the lion's body, the snake as a tail, and the goat that's Frankensteined onto the back. Each part serves different purposes, like the goat casts magic, the snake spits venomous clouds, and the lion, well, rips you to shreds. At first it seemed like this fight was one of those easy peasy permanently stagger the enemy type of battles, since I managed to pretty quickly get rid of the snake tail and the goat's head on my very first use of Emulation, taking down 1.5 of the Chimera's health bars in the process. Now, if you're anything like me, you would think, great, all that's left to do now is jump on the beast one more time and we're good. And believe me when I say, I wish it would be that easy. Because as you may have noticed throughout the fight, there's this green glow around the Chimera every few seconds. And I think we all know what green stands for in video games. Yep, exactly. This fucker was healing himself. At this point I didn't think much of it, since it has done this the entire fight and I managed to get it this low without any problems. But oh boy, was I wrong. Because from this moment on I was not able to deal any significant damage. The Chimera would roughly stay at the same percentage of health while I was holding onto it, and then just heal itself for like a quarter of a health bar while I needed to activate the skill again. I even managed to take out the lion's head, which removed its ability to attack with its paws entirely, but not the healing. The battle lasted about 15 minutes and I burned through my entire stash of consumables, but in the end the Chimera had regained nearly a whole health bar since I destroyed the snake and the goat. Yep, looks like I'm in trouble. But I'm no one to give up that easily, so let's go for round 2. This time I made sure my pawn was fighting alongside me. I'm sure together we can best the beast. Yeah, no way I'm going to beat the Chimera with my current damage output. It just has too much healing. I think we can all agree that it's now time to finally upgrade my daggers. Upgrading weapons in Dragon's Dogma is pretty simple. Up to level 3 all you have to do is get the materials, pay some money, and voila, your weapons are now stronger. The next stage would be dragon forging them, but I'm not gonna do this in this run. Luckily I already got all of the materials for level 1 and 2 from grinding the vocations level earlier, so all that's left to do is to kill some undeads in the wilted forest for some insignias. And just like that, the daggers are level 3 and Marble Global around 100 strength stronger. Time to show the Chimera who's the boss. I make my way to the boss room, set my balls ablaze, and within the first cycle managed to kill the snake, the goat, and the lion's head. An exceptional start. I'm sure I got it this time. Or so I thought, because the longer the fight lasted, the more it became clear that upgrading the daggers did not have the intended effect. And after the Chimera had almost fully healed itself, I had enough. It left me with no other choice than to assemble the gang once more. I made it through the entire game without any additional pawns, but now I'm pissed. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if they would be enough to take the Chimera down. But at this point I'm willing to try anything. The start of the fight was more than bumpy, with me getting poisoned instantly, eating pretty much every attack the lion throws at me, and getting eaten by the snake. Luckily, because of my fiery nature, the snake took too much damage while doing so and effectively killed itself, allowing me to come back into the fight. I then did what I already did 5 times and killed the goat as well as the lion's head, and then waited for my new allies to join, which they didn't do at first because they'd much rather lay around dead somewhere. After I fixed that, they finally cared to join in on the fun, and at first it seemed like we still had not enough damage because the Chimera suddenly had 2 health bars again, but after 10 minutes of consistent stabbing and burning, we finally made it. God, I swear that thing was more annoying than the ox cart. Let's move on to the roof. Upon arriving there, we find Palpatine, who transforms some of his followers into whites, which we of course have to defeat. And let me tell you, after the Chimera fight, this was like a 5-day wellness stay at a beach resort. Yeah, sure, they summoned skeletons and blasted spells, but at least they didn't freaking heal themselves constantly. So I managed to defeat them by killing the undeads, dodging their attacks, and jumping up and down underneath them. After that, it was time for Palpatine's evil speech, but before he could finish, he was killed by Grigori. I just love that part. The dragon then dares me to fight him and takes off. I'm more than glad to accept his challenge, but first I'ma release the pawns real quick and stock up on some supplies. With that done, I head back to underneath the Great Wall and make my way through the tutorial dungeon once more. I considered fighting my way through at first, but then I remembered that at the end there was another Chimera waiting for me, so I just ran past every enemy and lured the Chimera onto the pressure plates to open up the door for me, because there's no way I'm fighting another one of those things again. And with that, it's finally time to face Grigori. Come on, you oversized lizard, let's get this over with. You'll pay for kidnapping Aldous? Okay, I have no idea why the game thinks that Aldous would be my beloved. I mean, yeah, maybe we shared a moment or two, but that was purely work related, I swear. But whatever, I triggered a fight by walking up to the dragon, and after an epic chase through the catacombs, I set myself on fire and stood as close to Grigori as possible, giving him, at max, a sore throat. Because damage wise, well, there was virtually none. If this is the damage I deal throughout the entire fight, I am going to be in big trouble. The dragon then breaks through the wall, allowing me to finally climb him, but all that did was piss him off and he nearly killed me with a single swipe. The next attempt wasn't too fruitful either, but luckily he decided to take off, and this time it was time for me to chase him. Well, sort of. Basically I just had to run on top of the wall to the next scripted checkpoint while making sure I don't get burned to a crisp. And while we're at it, can we just appreciate how epic this whole sequence is? I mean, just look at him. At the end of the wall, I need to fire a ballista, which would technically be forbidden in this run, but since it's a scripted event and the shot doesn't actually deal any damage, I'll allow it. Next, I climb up his tail to punch him in the back, which again is scripted and I have no other choice but doing it. And then we connect our hearts or some shit, I don't know what's happening there. Important thing is, this opens up his weak spot, which I will definitely need in the next segment of the battle, because now it's finally time for the actual fight. And as you may have noticed, I don't have any pawns with me. This is, well, because my main pawn died somewhere along the way, but also because I want to face Grigori one-on-one like a true gentleman. So let's get started. I activated Emulation as soon as the fight started and then immediately ran under his body, trying to get a good grip on him so I could chill over his heart. You know, just like I handled pretty much all of the fights in this challenge. But since this is a huge ass dragon, it wasn't as simple as just double jumping and grabbing. My main objective was to get onto him in the first place, so I just latched onto his arm and from there I tried to crawl my way down to his chest. This was a little finicky because of the rapid camera movement, but I managed to get there eventually. Grigori then tried to grab me, but luckily I was positioned low enough so he missed. I thought this was also the case with his icicle spell at first, but nope, turns out that can hit me. But I have to say I'm happy with the damage so far, maybe this really is going to work out. So I dodged my way under his body again, set myself on fire and started climbing once more. And after about 2.5 health bars, Grigori took off, landed on a nearby rock and started rambling about destiny and free will or something like that. I waited till he was done, dodged some fireballs in the meantime and then shot him down with a ballista once more. Again, I didn't have any other choice here. The fall put him in the perfect position for me to climb on him, and then it's just a matter of holding on for dear life. Because I don't want to be on the ground while he blasts his supercharged attack. Unfortunately, I got forced to let go due to his icicle spell, and he even managed to grab me before I could climb onto him again. And then again once I already was on him. But nothing to worry about, right? I mean, I still have plenty of herbs and mushrooms and the damage is good so far. Well, unfortunately I didn't account for his armpit, which for some reason seems to be able to just one-shot me. I mean, sure, why not? Next time I make sure to bring some deodorant for protection. All jokes aside though, I have a really good feeling about this fight. It seems really doable. And then I died again, and again, and again, and again. All in all, it took me about 15 tries and a lot of luck to not just randomly die on the spot or fall to my death. But then I finally managed to do it. I defeated Grigori solo with nothing else but setting myself on fire. Just look how happy Marble Global is. But of course that's not the end of the game just yet, so I head back to Gran Soren, fight the Duke and jump down the Everfall. Next up I need to collect 20 Wake Stones. The easiest way to do that is to simply farm the monsters down here in the Everfall, but before I'm able to do that in the first place I need to defeat this Beholder monster-like creature. And this thing was more annoying than hard, because the only times I could actually damage it was when he either tried to swallow me or after I got rid of his tentacles. With that out of the way, all that's left to do is to farm some wake stones, go through a trippy tunnel and defeat the literal god of this world, who wasn't a challenge at all. And with that, it's finally done. I beat Dragon's Dogma by setting myself on fire. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, this would really help my channel out. And if you haven't seen my other video where I made the game's hard mode a cakewalk, feel free to check it out. See you in the next one, bye.